Imagine walking into a bookstore, or I guess scrolling through an ebook store these days, and you find a title that promises, well, the absolute world. It says it can explain the nature of God, the universe, your own consciousness, and also how to stop being lazy.
That is quite the Venn diagram. Usually you get one or the other, right? You get the heavy metaphysics in one aisle, and then you get the productivity hacks way over in self-help.
And the really heavy spiritual books, they usually start with some grand, abstract declaration of truth. But the text we're looking at today, the Dasbodh, it starts completely differently.
It really does.
It starts with a question from you, the reader. The very first sentence is basically, what is this book? What is spoken here? And what do I actually get out of listening to it?
It's incredibly modern in that way.
Yeah.
It respects your time. It knows that attention is a currency, and before you spend it, you want to know the return on investment.
That's what hooked me. It felt less like a sermon and more like a pitch. So welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're exploring the Dasbodh, specifically the first chapter, or Samas.
Right.
This is a huge 17th century Marathi text, a classic. But this first chapter really acts like the user manual for the whole thing.
Yeah.
And looking at the source material, the promises it makes are, well, they're audacious.
They are. And to understand why it starts with that kind of skeptical question, you have to get the format. The text says in verse 2, this is a samvad, a dialogue.
A conversation.
A conversation between a guru and a disciple. So it's not a monologue delivered from a mountaintop to a silent nodding crowd. It's an exchange.
Which explains why the skepticism is baked in right from the start. The disciple's allowed to ask, so what's in it for me?
Precisely. And the text, written by the saint Samarth Ramdas, does not shy away from that at all. It lays out a curriculum that covers everything from the highest non-dual reality of the capital T truth to, very practical things.
Like how to write poetry or how to spot a fool.
Exactly. And how to survive in a chaotic world.
We are definitely going to get to the spotting a fool part and the part about turning a lazy person into an active one, because that sounds, frankly, like magic. But first, let's look at the curriculum. Verses 1 through 3 lay out these three main pillars. What are we signing up for here?
The three pillars are Bhakti Marg, Jnana, and Vairagya.
Okay, let's break those down because those are heavy terms and I want to make sure we're not just glossing over them. Bhakti Marg is the path of devotion.
It is, but in the Dasbodh, it's specific. It's not just blind faith or, lighting a candle and hoping. It involves listening, singing, serving. It's an active, engaged process. But here's the key, and this is where the author is brilliant. He pairs it immediately with Jnana.
Which is knowledge.
Knowledge. And that always seems like a contradiction to some people. You have the heart people who do devotion and the head people who do philosophy.
And they usually don't sit at the same table.
And this text says you need both. Jnana here isn't just data, it's self-knowledge. The argument is that if you have devotion without knowledge, it just becomes superstition. But if you have knowledge without devotion, it becomes dry and arrogant. They have to balance each other.
And then there's the third one, which I think is maybe the hardest sell for a modern audience, Vairagya. Detachment.
Or dispassion.
Yeah, when I hear detachment, I picture giving up my house, my job, my Netflix subscription, and going to sit in a cave. Is that what it's demanding?
That's the common fear. But in this context, Vairagya is more about clarity than it is about poverty. Think of it less as giving up things and more as giving up your addiction to things.
So it's about not being jerked around by your senses all the time.
Exactly. It's about emotional sovereignty. You can have things, but the things shouldn't have you.
Okay. The text also uses this word niskayo a lot in the beginning. It talks about the determination of things. It sounds very scientific, like it's saying, we're not guessing here, we're settling this.
It is very definitive. Nishayo implies a firm conclusion, not a hypothesis. And the list of things it claims to determine is intimidating. Verse 9 is the big one. It says it provides the determination of who am I?
The ultimate identity crisis.
Right.
Solved.
Right. It promises to sort out the relationship between the jiva, the individual soul, the you that feels small and anxious, and Shiva, the supreme reality.
It also mentions videhastithi, the bodiless state. That sounds a little out there.
It is. It refers to a state of consciousness where you aren't limited by your physical body, but just when you think the text is going to float away into the clouds, verse 10 brings you crashing right back to earth. It says it also covers chaturya.
Which means cleverness.
Cleverness, intelligence, just astute behavior.
See, that's what surprised me. Why does a spiritual text care if I'm clever?
Yeah.
Usually they tell you to be, simple or innocent.
Because Samarth Ramdas was a very practical saint. He believed that spiritual realization shouldn't turn you into a pushover. Chaturya is about navigating the world, understanding people, managing situations.
It even lists the characteristics of poetry and art.
Yeah.
So it's teaching you art appreciation.
And how to create it. It's telling you, yes, we'll discuss the soul, but we also need to discuss how to be smart, how to speak well, and how to not get scammed by the world.
That's refreshingly holistic. It's trying to be a guide to existence, not just a guide to prayer.
It's an integrated approach, for sure. It explicitly says it answers the many questions and doubts of the mind.
Okay, so we have the scope. It's massive.
Yeah.
But this is where I have to play the skeptic, and I think the text expects it. Why should we trust this specific book? There are thousands of scriptures out there.
It actually anticipates that exact objection.
Right.
In verses 15 through 20, it essentially pulls out its bibliography.
It name drops.
In a way, yeah. It lists the Upanishads, the Vedas, Vedanta. It lists a whole series of Gitas, not just the famous Bhagavad Gita, but the Shiva Gita, Rama Gita, and so on.
But why does that matter? Just because you quote other old books doesn't mean you're right.
It matters because it establishes pedigree. It's saying, I'm not inventing some new cult here. I'm synthesizing thousands of years of established wisdom. But, and this is the absolute pivot point of the chapter, it doesn't rest on that authority.
Right. I noticed that in verse 16, it uses the word atma prachiti.
This is the most critical concept here. Atma prachiti, self-experience, self-verification.
So don't just take my word for it.
Exactly. The text asserts that these truths are for pratyaksha at a direct perception right now. It's claiming that the wisdom here is empirically verifiable in your own experience.
That completely shifts the burden of proof. It's like a scientist saying, here's the formula, but you have to run the experiment in your own lab to see if it works.
And that saves it from being pure dogma, but there's a tension. It also asserts its words are aligned with Bhagavad Vakya, God's words.
So it's the absolute truth, backed by God, but you have to verify it yourself.
It's a delicate balance.
Okay, but what happens if you try to verify and you disagree? Or what if you just dismiss it without even trying? Because the text gets surprisingly aggressive towards its critics.
Aggressive is putting it mildly. It comes out swinging.
I was reading that section on the psychology of the critic, and I felt like I was reading a breakdown of modern internet trolls. It feels very, very familiar.
It's timeless psychology. When the text describes someone who calls the book false or useless, it doesn't just say they're wrong, it diagnoses them. It says they're driven by matsara.
Which is jealousy, right? Or envy.
Yes. And it lays out this specific chain reaction. It argues this kind of skepticism usually starts with abhiman ego.
I know better.
Right? Who is this person to teach me? And that ego leads to jealousy. That jealousy curdles into hatred or scorn, and that hatred boils over into anger.
It's a downward spiral. You start out just being full of yourself, and you end up full of rage.
It is. It describes such a person as antari nasla, internally rotten, consumed by desire and anger.
There was a really violent metaphor in there about nectar and death.
Verse 25, it says that for such a person, even if they consume nectar, they still die.
Meaning, even if you give them the absolute truth, the cure for all their suffering,
It won't work.
it won't work because the vessel is contaminated. If your internal system is running on ego and scorn, you can't digest wisdom. You'll just turn it into something else to argue about.
So the advice is basically, don't be that guy.
Verse 26 is explicit. Abhiman tyagane. Abandon ego. That's the prerequisite. If you want to get anything out of this, you have to be willing to admit you might not know everything.
Okay, let's say we do that. We suspend judgment. We listen with an open mind. What's the payoff? The Falshriti section, the results.
This is the sales pitch.
Yeah.
And it's a good one. Verses 28 to 37. The first thing it emphasizes is speed. The change is tatkal.
Instant.
The actions change instantly. It's not suggesting you need 40 years of practice. It claims understanding the truth cuts the root of doubt immediately. But let's go back to that productivity claim. Verse 33. The lazy, alalasi, become industrious, sakshapi. This is the one I really struggle with. How does realizing I am not the body make me better at my job?
This is where Dasbodh shines. Think about why people are lazy. It's often not physical fatigue, it's mental weight, it's doubt, confusion, the anxiety of who am I and what do people think of me and am I going to fail?
All that background noise.
Exactly. That is what drains your battery. The text claims that by providing clarity, by removing those doubts, it frees up that energy. Think of your brain like a smartphone with 50 apps running in the background.
Apps for anxiety, ego, jealousy. your phone is going to lag.
And Dasbodh is the close all apps button. When you're not bogged down by the ego, you naturally become industrious. You flow, you have energy because you're not wasting it.
That makes so much sense. It's productivity through subtraction, not addition.
Perfect analogy. It says the foolish become wise and alert, Daksha. You become sharper, more effective, because you're not fighting yourself anymore.
It also mentions that sinners repent and critics start praising. A total turnaround.
And it addresses the emotional baseline. It says sorrow, illusion, and ignorance are destroyed. In their place, the listener gains Sanatan.
Which is like satisfaction.
A deep, resolved peace. A peace that doesn't fluctuate. And it promises Vishranti.
Rest. That sounds nice.
Real rest. Yeah. Not just sleep, but the rest of a mind that has stopped struggling. And the text links this directly to what it calls Deha Buddhi.
Can you unpack that? Deha Buddhi.
It's the body intellect. The deep identification of thinking, I am this body, I am this name, I am this job title. The text says this is the source of all our dangers and deceptions, because if you think you are the body, you're fragile, you're going to die. That creates constant background anxiety.
And the text claims that just listening can break that identification.
Verse 35 says, Shravan Matrit, merely by listening.
That is a huge claim. Merely by listening, not merely by fasting for a month or something.
It emphasizes the power of attention. It says you don't need difficult Durgam practices. The path is sugam, it's accessible. Even non-devotees can get this liberation if they just listen with the right intent.
So it's not gatekept. It's available to anyone who really pays attention.
Correct. The problem isn't that the truth is far away, it's that we aren't actually listening.
So zooming out, we have a text that validates itself with scripture, but demands you verify it through your own experience. It warns you that your own ego is the only thing in your way. And it promises that if you just listen properly, you'll go from lazy to active, from foolish to sharp, from sorrowful to satisfied.
That's the comprehensive promise of chapter 1. It's basically saying, this is a mirror, I can show you your true face, but you have to be willing to look.
It's a pretty high stakes proposition for a book.
It is. Verse 38, near the very end, sums it all up. It says, Jayacha Bhavarta Jayasa Tayas Labh Taisa, which means, as is one's faith or attitude, so is the benefit they receive. It puts all the responsibility right back on you, the listener.
So the variable isn't the book. The variable is us.
Precisely. The text is the constant. We are the variable.
That's a powerful place to land. It really challenges how we consume content. We usually ask, is this article good? The Dasbodh asks, is your listening good?
Are you a good vessel? That's the question.
So here's the thought we want to leave you with. We all have areas in our lives where we feel a bit lazy or foolish or confused. The text claims it can flip that switch to active and wise just through the power of deep listening.
But it requires abandoning the ego that says, I already know this.
Exactly. So as you go about your day, ask yourself this. If this text claims to turn the lazy into the active and the foolish into the wise, where do you see yourself on that spectrum right now? And more importantly, are you listening to critique or are you listening to change?
That's the determination only you can make.
Thanks for listening to this deep dive into the Dasbodh. We'll see you next time.